Welcome to NCIX Tech Tips. Today's episode is going to be another update from the NCIX PC laboratory. This is the Vesta 5350 OC Mark II. So this is a continuation of the proud tradition of the original 5350, which, by the way, was the first factory overclocked system that ever came out of the NCIX production facility. We take everything we did in that original system and make it that much better. Now, as usual, we're going to start with the exterior of the system. So we've changed up the case from the original 5350 OC, and we have gone with a Fractal Design Arc MIDI. Now, if you've seen the update that I did on my wife's machine, I used an Arc MIDI for that one, and I was very, very impressed by it. So we've gone with this for a production system now. On the side panel, you're going to find either mounting for a 140 millimeter or a 160 millimeter fan, whichever you prefer, although we have it preloaded with a 140 millimeter fan. On the front, you find tons of intakes. So there's a full 2 by 140 millimeter front intake that is covered not only by a honeycomb mesh, but then also by a fine plastic, like a plastic meshy fabric underneath that serves two purposes. One is to make it look better aesthetically, and two is that it acts as a dust filter. On the top, we find all the usual I/O. You got your reset switch, your microphone, your headphone, your power button, your two USB 2.0 ports, and one USB 3.0 port. Also, on the rest of the top, you find a very, very large ventilation space as well. This one has two 140 millimeter fans under it, and it uses the same honeycomb mesh with the plastic, shredded plastic looking thing underneath. It makes it look very clean, but the case still maintains excellent ventilation and a very clean professional appearance. We've done some builds that are sort of more like, you know, lights and windows and all that kind of stuff. Not everyone prefers that, so we do like to provide a variety of options. On the back, the I/O is provided, of course, by the motherboard, so there's not much variation there. We have a 120 mil instead of a 140 mil in the back because we are using liquid cooling in this machine to achieve the silence and overclocking that we're going for. We've got 6 USB 3.0 ports, a PS2 port. We have all the video outs you could possibly want, DVI, VGA, DisplayPort, and HDMI, so you can use that with Lucid Virtue if you want to take advantage of your dedicated graphics card's performance and your integrated graphics card's quick sync, allowing you to quickly transcode video. We have two eSATA ports, gigabit Ethernet, 7.1 audio out, and off your video card itself, dual DVI and mini HDMI. Now, the Vesta 6350 OC is one of those machines where, you know, at, what is it, 1,300 bucks, this isn't your best value hardware. It's not. I know it's not. I mean, the YouTube sort of comments about how this isn't the best value, you know what, you're right, it's not. However, this is sort of like, it's not like the super elite hardware that you spend sort of way too much for. It's like the legit hardware that's kind of in the middle there. So let's go ahead and pull it apart and go through what is inside this, what I'm going to call legit gaming beast. So that side panel fan is plugged in right now. So what happens is when I pull this out, it's going to pop off the header inside. So if you ever do take the side panel off your 6350 OC, incidentally, NCIX PCs don't void the warranty from opening up or modifying it or whatever else, just so you guys know. Just be careful, you'll have to plug it back in when you put the panel back on. So on the inside, I'm going to change things up a little bit, and we're going to start with the storage. So this machine has a dedicated 60 gig storage drive for the OS. It also has a 1 terabyte drive. That's a regular hard drive, a Seagate drive, for your games and for your programs and applications. So the SSD, we feel it is worth the compromise on storage space in order to make sure you have an SSD in your machine one way or another. You could also send in a message and ask them to configure it as a caching solution, where you're using the 1 terabyte drive as your OS drive and your storage drive, and then you're using the SSD to cache it. This motherboard is capable of that. So moving on towards the motherboard, we have a Gigabyte GAZ77X UD3H. Once again, this is like the latest chipset. Not the highest end board by any stretch of the imagination, but a very, very legit solution, and it looks fantastic. We wanted to make this machine color coordinated without being too flashy, so we've gone with a black and white overall theme inside. I think it looks really, really sharp. We've also got some yellow accents on the cabling, the graphics card, and the Seasonic power supply. So the Seasonic power supply is a 620 watt power supply, meaning that you can not only run the configuration we've got in there now, but you could also go SLI in the future and even overclock the machine more if you wanted to, and you would not run out of power, so that wouldn't be an issue for you. We've gone with a GTX 560 Ti. Yes, it's not a Kepler card, it's a Fermi card, but still a very, very respectable card in all the current games. We've got 8 gigs of Mushkin Blackline memory. We've got a Coolit Eco liquid cooling unit here with a sandwiched dual 120mm fan configuration on the liquid-cooled 4.0 gigahertz 3570K processor from Intel. And I'm getting a lot of flack about the way I say processor, so why don't I start? Okay, I'll tell you what, I'll do it this one time. The 3570K Ivy Bridge processor. You guys prefer that? We've got an M-Disc ready LG DVD burner. So M-Disc, remember, those are those discs that retain your data forever. In spite of whatever weather effects, they don't degrade like the dies do in most discs. And I think that pretty much covers it. So we strive for well-balanced configurations. We strive for factory overclocked configurations that make sense. So if you're looking for the legit hardware, this is pretty much the way to go. Actually, there's no guarantees you'll get an EVGA 560 Ti OC. However, you will definitely get a factory overclocked 560 Ti. So we've actually got a variety of different ones just to make sure that just because one's out of stock, your machine won't get delayed. So this, stepping it up over the first generation product. Ivy Bridge processor, C77 chipset. We've moved on to overclocked graphics cards. And Slick says to talk about the RAM. I already talked about the RAM. So I think that's pretty much it. So in conclusion, there's not much more to say. If you're looking for a sweet gaming rig with the legit level hardware that is not going to break the bank and is not going to necessarily be as flashy or exciting looking, but still, you know, has those nice little elegant touches and is in a very well-cooled chassis. Actually, one thing I want to cover before we wrap it up here is why we set up the cooling configuration the way that we did. So we took everything out of the front, because we only have a single hard drive here, and hard drives, honestly, the reliability is not really affected by heat until you get sort of very extreme. So what happens with this case, due to the plastic meshy thing that's going on, is you get dust rings really quickly if you use a fan intake either in the front or at the top. So we wanted to use only exhausts where that's going to be involved. So that's why we have an exhaust up here in the top. We also have an exhaust here and an intake here. So that means we do have ample airflow coming up through the case this way, but we're honestly just not that concerned about the intake at the front. And I think that pretty much covers it. Vesta 5350 OC Mark II. I hope you guys have enjoyed this little NCIX PC showcase. Don't forget to subscribe to NCIX Tech Tips.